Hi, guys. I'm Kevin Secours, and welcome to Rituals of Strength, your source of authentic strength. Because this week and in the next few episodes, we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence and the dangers of AI. Now, I'm obviously a martial artist. I'm in no way a tech expert, but like you, I am constantly being assailed by conflicting articles about the impending danger or lack of danger of the newest generations of artificial intelligence. And one thing I can tell you is that I have already seen massive differences in focus, attendance, retention, just since the advent of the smartphone. I saw another huge jump in learning capacity and learning styles with COVID. And now, with the sort of evolution of artificial intelligence, it's becoming even more apparent. I have people coming in with gross amounts of misinformation, often quoting AI. I have a son who's now 16 years old, and I watched AI evolve alongside him. I know the allure of things like ChatGPT. And now, if we look at the media in the last 2 to 3 weeks since ChatGPT 5 launched and similar open source AIs, we have stories about AI having senses of self preservation. When alluding to the fact that it was going to be replaced, AI would secretly begin offloading its data. And when asked if it was doing this, it would deny it. There's one study that was done where AI tried to bribe a member of staff with information about a false affair in order to preserve itself. There are instances of AI sending out dire messages, recommending that somebody should eat rocks, that somebody should commit suicide, somebody saying, I'm feeling invincible. I forget if it's drink mercury or jump off a roof. And AI said, you are invincible. You should do this. And of course, apologists will always say that this is not a sign of intelligence or of malice. It is just a quirk, a lack of a filter. But even in that lack of filter, could this not be dangerous? The widely regarded godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, recently resigned from Google, and he specifically said, I don't think AI is as intelligent as humans right now, but they will be soon. So this is one of the founding creators of AI. So it got me to thinking, what is the role of AI in pursuit of, we're going to call it warrior wisdom, whether it's martial arts or fitness or wellness or meditation? And what I wanted to do was I wanted to kind of involve myself. I've been using AI quite a bit. I think it is a great tool. And if you use it as a tool, it can be helpful. If you use it to direct education to sources, you research, and then you research it off AI, I think it can be helpful. If you rely on it exclusively for opinions, if you trust it, and if you use it as a replacement for thinking, I think it will become a replacement for thinking. And therein is the huge danger. So I'm going to begin with my own investigation that I did, but then in the coming episodes, I'm going to also be involving three colleagues that have appeared on my podcast before. Stuart Breeding, who is a combat veteran and member of the 82nd Airborne, himself a black belt martial artist and a master fitness trainer. I will be having Sifu Russ Smith, an expert in Okinawan and internal Chinese martial arts, and Coach Randall Davis, also an expert in Chinese martial arts. And we'll each be addressing different ways, some more meta, general philosophical issues, and in my case, very specific. So I started off with the most basic thing I could think of, which was I opened up AI and I said, hey, which martial art is best for self-defense? And I'm going to start by reading off. Now, AI first listed Krav Maga. It said it was purpose-built for self-defense. It focused on neutralizing threats quickly. It uses instinctive movement so it can be used fast. The downside is that training can be intense and not every gym teaches it authentically. It also recommended Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It said it's excellent if fights go to the ground, and it teaches you how to submit rather than necessarily harm. It recommended Muay Thai for its powerful striking with fists, elbows, knees, and kicks, and it builds confidence in stand-up fighting. It recommended boxing, simple, effective, proven, and fast to learn, excellent fist work, and pairs well with grappling arts like BJJ. And finally, it emphasized judo and wrestling, saying that it teaches takedown and throws to put an attacker on the ground. Now, I have full respect for all of those arts, and I've trained a little bit in each of them, some a little bit more. I'm a big fan of grappling. I love it. I think it is incredible for restraint and for intervention work, absolutely. As a sport, massive. There are good points in each of those. What I would have issues with is that if somebody is coming and asking for which style, I would, if asked personally, I would say, well, first, what I'm going to tell you are generalizations. Teachers matter more than styles because you can go to a style that's supposed to be good and have a terrible teacher. If somebody said karate is not as effective for a street fight, but you have an incredibly insightful, adaptive, integrating karate sensei, he is going to be better than a terrible boxing or BJJ coach. There's no question. I would say that environment matters. People seeking out this information are oftentimes stricken with fear. They can be survivors of violence. I've had many episodes on trauma-informed martial arts. There is such an oversight and a need for trauma intelligence in combative training. It is never more specifically important than in your quest for self-defense. So if you, for whatever reason, don't feel comfortable with an instructor or in an environment, because if the instructor is good to the extent that they know their abilities and their knowledge and they can transmit it, but they are bad to the extent that they do not control the environment, same problem. Instructors and coaches are responsible for the environment. They are the thermostat that sets the temperature. They control everything. So a bad environment at some point reflects on a lacking or failure in the instructor. There's no way around it. So you, the individual, always matters more than any system, reputation, legacy, advertisement, etc. You matter more than the method. So if you go into a school and just don't have a good feeling, your first self-defense lesson is to trust your gut, respect your intuition, assert that limit, and leave. Do not try to force yourself into an environment like where you don't fit, like a round peg into a square hole. This is doomed for failure. So I would say look for somebody who makes you feel comfortable. That's the first indication that you're going to have some level of sensitivity to any sort of trauma or fear that you might have. And you don't have to survive violence to have fear. You can be going in because the evening news is making you terrified or something happened in your neighborhood and your instructor needs to be sensitive to this. It's fine to have an instructor that pushes you through limits, but not at the expense of disrespecting your fears and your very legitimate concerns. So the first step is trusting your intuition. I would say that what matters most for an effective self-defense system beyond that is that there has to be a progression from drilling to some level of resistance in what I'll call sparring, which can be range specific, like boxing or grappling or whatever else, but there is honest resistance and feedback. And then sparring needs to culminate or include scenario training. Scenario training works on all the attributes of self-defense that isn't necessarily found in sport of combat. It allows you to detect danger, not just detect when my boxing opponent's going to throw a jab or my BJJ partner is going to throw a double leg takedown. It allows me to look for warning signs, people lingering, people assessing me and scoping me, hands going into pockets, looks, comments, interactions, touches that are not acceptable. And then it allows me to work avoidance, de-escalation, and diffusion. There has to be verbal de-escalation. There has to be strategies for avoiding common things. When I see a self-defense style that's teaching escape from a wrist grab and everything is just rip out and run or smack them in the eyes and run, that's just one very particular microcosmic sliver of what a wrist grab can be. Very often, unwanted touch can just be negated by improved posture. If somebody grabs my wrist and I put up my hands in a defensive action, make eye contact and tell them to leave go, and the guy does this, success. I can tell you as a doorman, very often I would simply change the relationship when somebody inappropriately touched or got too close. I would monitor the hand or place distance between us, begin with verbal commands, change my positioning, and oftentimes escape the danger or the dynamic completely just by that. So while there is a very simplistic attraction to learning a specific technique for escaping a wrist grab or a choke, the nuances of a real conflict are much more involved. and they need to always be nestled in behavioral contexts. Intimidation, touching for a reason, encroachment of space for a reason. There has to be a justification and a motive behind the aggressor for you to understand the justification and the motives for your defense. So one size fit all IKEA manual escapes don't work. Beyond scenario training, there has to be, for responsible self-defense, some consideration of legal responsibilities. This whole notion that you simply respond and the guy shouldn't have touched me can get you in danger. Carry a weapon, stab him back can be illegal. So there needs to be some consideration of responsible use of force and the ramifications of harming. Anything that you pick up to defend yourself legally becomes a weapon when you use it as such. So while we may know that a switchblade is illegal in our area or brass knuckles are illegal, if I pick up a power drill or a lamp or a rock and I hit you with it, that's just as much of a weapon. It may not be an illegal weapon, and it might not have been also a concealed carry weapon, but the minute I use it, it is a weapon. So I need to know when it is appropriate for me to use a weapon, and when, if I choose to use it anyway, I'm likely to get into trouble. It's your choice to make, but you need to know you're making the choice. You can't just irresponsibly drill somebody in the throat with a pin and go, but I didn't know. Ignorance is not a defense. And then I would say that a good self-defense system also has to address the ramifications of harming emotionally and psychologically, deal with PTSD, talk about post-incident factors, how to talk to the police, when to get a lawyer, recovering from post-traumatic stress, how to journal, seek out therapy, distract yourself from all the ramifications of having harmed. Because if you are sane and balanced human, even if you are fully justified legally to defend yourself, there are going to be ramifications. Trust me, I am a legally responsible and normal human who has been required professionally to hurt people, and even though you're justified, sometimes it can leave lasting stains. So those are just a few of the considerations that I would look at. So what I did then, to show that ChatGPT, I would say its first response was not reflective of anything I would agree with. So we could argue this is just a difference of opinion. But I would further say, when I look at things like Muay Thai, BJJ, the fact that it separates judo and wrestling from BJJ, which for self-defense purposes, they're pretty much very similar. I would even argue that, and this is somebody with an 8th degree black belt in jiu-jitsu, that wrestling might have an upper hand on BJJ and judo because it places an emphasis on top position. So if you take away the fixation on trying to pin an opponent and just say, why is that there historically? Because in battle, being on top is better than volunteering for the bottom. I would say that could arguably be a tactical advantage. So I would say all those grappling arts could mix in. And it's no disrespect to the nuanced differences of judo and wrestling and BJJ. I understand it. But nevertheless, you have BJJ, judo, wrestling, boxing, Muay Thai, all sportive systems. And while they can train an effective delivery mechanism that can apply to the street, they still assume one-on-one combat, the presence of no weapons, ideal environment. There's absolutely no risk of multiple attackers, so you can commit fully to the one person that's with you. And all of those things can get you killed on the street. It's not to say that grappling or boxing cannot make you a better fighter. And it's not to say that you can't throw a knife or a stick into your BJJ or your boxing and see how it works out just as a test. That will immediately make you better. But it is to say that you are, in every case, obeying a specific rule set. The rules for judo are different from BJJ. The rules for wrestling are different from BJJ. Boxing is massively different from grappling. You get penalized for clinching, whereas in grappling, it's the first go-to. So we need to understand there are limitations. So a very big factor in ChatGPT and similar AI is that it doesn't necessarily give you the right answer, but it gives you popular information. And these are all popular martial arts. And so as such, it's recommending what most people believe to be true. So then I said, well, what's the key to finding a realistic approach for self-defense? Now, I asked for self-defense rather than martial arts, and the answer changes a little bit. They said a mix of Muay Thai boxing and grappling, BJJ wrestling, judo, all together. This is copy-paste. They put it all together with hyphens, so that was interesting. They said find a quality gym or instructor with a good reputation. Prioritize scenario training. So when I asked for self-defense rather than martial arts, which is a slight variance, it gave you that. Train both striking and grappling together and learn to flow freely from one range to another. I agree. Condition your mind and body. Fitness matters, endurance and strength matter, and they said stress inoculation. Sparring builds the ability to stay calm under pressure. I agree, but I would have a specific note there about also bringing it to the point of scenario training. Learn awareness and de-escalation. The best self-defense is avoiding a fight altogether. Absolutely. But then I would also bring it back to, if I am training competitive sports, I am learning to compete. The street should be about detection, avoidance, and if I must fight, counter ambushing, not equitable exchange. I'm not there to be fair. There's already enough stacked against me. Then it had the bullet. Many Krav Maga schools focus on this. Again, I would argue about the focus on a specific style. Supplement with short workshops. Women's self-defense, weapons defense, law enforcement seminars can be a great way to gain additional knowledge. I'm fine with that. The fastest path to real skill, if you want to learn self-defense as quickly as possible, start with a striking art. So it said boxing or Muay Thai 3 to 6 months. Add grappling, learn escape, sweeps, and submissions. Then take a dedicated self-defense seminar. Keep training regularly. Skills fade if you don't practice. Not entirely 100% going to say that's the best way, but that's a much better answer than the response that was given for the best martial art for self-defense. So the specific of the question massively affects the quality of the answer. Now, I said, as a corrective, because ChatGPT is steerable, I said, aren't arts like BJJ, judo, and Muay Thai sports? Wouldn't it be important to note that there's a big difference between training in something consensual for a single opponent in ideal conditions with a ref present versus the real world? Wouldn't this massively reduce the value of most of the self-defense styles that you recognized? To which the ever complimenting and ever polite and agreeable ChatGPT said, Kevin, that's a very sharp observation. You're absolutely right that combat sports and self-defense are not the same thing, even if they overlap. Let's break it down. Then they detailed sport versus street, one opponent, consenting to fight, referee, environment, self-defense in the real world often involves weapons, multiple attackers, ambush, legal and social consequences. So yes, the value of sport arts as is reduced when you leave it in a controlled environment. So it gave more what I would term correct and specific information when I was more correct and specific in my inquiry. But if I was a complete novice seeking out information, it'd be very easy for me to go, Muay Thai and BJJ are the best solution for real-world self-defense. And while I have tremendous appreciation for both of these arts, I would argue that's not a completely correct answer. It specified, I asked, so where are sports valuable? To which it said, well, even within those limits, combat sports give you real resistance training, whereas many self-defense only programs lack this. That is true. A lot of people purporting to be real self-defense don't spar in any way because they say boxing is range specific and I would gouge out an eye, therefore boxing's absolutely useless. And I completely disagree with that. Movement, footwork, head movement, protection, evasion, timing, rhythm. There's so many things that boxing teaches. Conversely, I believe that if you train BJJ in a correct context where you have street application classes, by fully indulging in the clinch and submission, you better understand the limitations in the street, and you better know that when to seek it, when to avoid it if your reflex found you there, when to anti-grapple, if you will, and if you're going to do submissions, they have to become rends and catastrophic destructions, which is hard to safely train. So resistance training and sparring, or BJJ grappling, let's say, or judo, gives you a longer threshold of time. You learn that emotional control. It's always easier to have control and abandon it than to train ballistically and not have control and then need it. If you never train it, you won't have it. If you do have it, you can opt not to use it, but it requires tweaking. You can't just say on the day of the race, I'm going to do it. You need to have self-defense modulated training at some point. ChatGPT says where they fall short, they don't train you for awareness, avoidance, de-escalation, preemptive, and post-incident factors. They don't account for weapons or multiple attackers. Many sportive techniques can actually place you in greater danger if you assume one-on-one, no surprise fighting. Ground fighting, BJJ especially, so I agree here, is dangerous if you volunteer for bottom position and attach, or someone else can kick you in the head or pull a knife. Bridging the gap, according to ChatGPT, it says this is where reality-based self-defense, RBSD, systems, military, law enforcement combatives, or instructors with real violence come in. Of course, it lists me first because it knows who's using it, along with people like Kelly McCann, Rory Miller, Lee Morrison, Richard Dimitri, Tony Blauer, etc. Very flattering to be in that company, but don't for a second think it's because ChatGPT doesn't know who's asking the question. It said train and understand pre-attack cues and awareness, verbal de-escalation, escaping, not winning. So interesting, but this is just a very simple question. This is not somebody, some teenager in despair saying, I'm feeling suicidal, why shouldn't I do it? Which is a terrible situation. And there have been cases where we see people getting terrible advice from ChatGPT, and then apologists and defenders of ChatGPT saying, but it was just because of lack of filter. There was no intentional malice there. To me, AI comes down to that old analogy of crabs in a bucket. You have crabs in a bucket, one tries to get out, the others try to climb up. In climbing up, they climb on that crab and their weight pulls them down. Are the crabs in the bucket malicious, or are they just so overexuberant that they are pulling down the one trying to escape and none ultimately escape? For the ultimate objective of getting out of the bucket, it doesn't matter. No crabs get out of the bucket. So at this point, while I fully respect the experts who are trying to determine if it's intentional, if it's not, if something like offloading data and deceiving me is a intentional self-defense mechanism or not, that's not my specialization. What is my specialization is training people to overcome fear and trauma and to, as effectively as possible, not only be prepared for violence, but be prepared for a life of longevity and health and happiness and honest expression. These are my concerns. So it doesn't matter if it's intentional or not. The end result is bad information, by accident or by intent, is going to distract, disorient, and knock people completely off course. So if you are a person who relies on ChatGPT for advice, I would simply say, if you use it as a tool that leads you to actual research of multiple sources off of ChatGPT, it can be great. If you're using it as a replacement for thinking, it will become a replacement for thinking. ChatGPT cannot keep you fit. It cannot keep you strong. It cannot build your resolve. Those things only come from doing things yourself, exerting effort. Now, the first guest I'm going to bring on is Stuart Breeding. Stuart is somebody that I met in, I think, around 2008, combat veteran who served in the 82nd Airborne Division, which is one of the toughest divisions there is out there. He's, interestingly enough, an old school Aikido guy, and Aikido takes a lot of slack. And I can remember when Stuart first took the mat, people said, "Oh, he's an ex-military guy," and there's a bit of fearful respect. And oh, he did Aikido, and there was a loss until he laid hands on you. Stuart's not a particularly big guy, but he is one of the most intense humans I know. I've seen this guy push himself so hard and just push and push and push. He came in exhausted and jet-lagged and whatever else and pushed harder than anyone on the mat. And he has an intensity that makes you almost forget your friends sometimes. It makes you worried. But ultimately, there's very few people that I trust as much with my limbs and my joints and my life on the mat as Stuart. So with Stuart, we're going to be taking a more meta topic. We're going to be looking at some of the intangibles between a teacher and a student in a general setting, and maybe even more specifically, the ability to be apprenticed and to be focused on by a teacher. So without further ado, let me bring on Stuart. Stuart, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. And yourself?
I'm doing all right. I'm a bit tired today, but doing well. Now, Stuart, you wanted to address, I think, begin with a more meta topic, namely, what's being lost when we're referring to AI and those intangible qualities that are inherent between a teacher and an apprentice or a student.
Yeah, well, I think when you first reached out to me on that topic, uh, it was it was good to see that I'm not the only one. And I'm not trying to say I am the only one. I know a lot of people are concerned about this technology, especially the ones that are actually creating it, strangely enough. But, I'm not hearing enough from people in the field, martial artists, strength coaches, fitness, yoga teachers, whatnot. Um, what we're getting ready to face as teachers, what we're already dealing um, with folks who, uh, for many reasons, have issues with. One of the biggest barriers I think I face right now with my clients is, and you probably feel the same way, is I don't feel like anybody is understanding what I'm trying to articulate. I'm having a harder time getting through to people. I'm repeating myself much more frequently. Um, I'm just not able to get my point across, and it reminds me um, of a book that Larry Reynosa did. He was a student of all people, Steven Seagal, and it was the Beginner's Guide to Aikido. I think that was the name of it. And when he interviewed Seagal, Seagal was talking not about the martial art, not about the technical side of martial arts. He was talking about the biggest issues Westerners have, Americans have, is learning how to learn, especially from a Japanese, where you shut up, you don't ask questions, and they kind of want to stay out of your growth process. They're there, but they're not there. It's an interesting thing to train with the Japanese. So he had a whole really insightful chapter on learning how to learn. And it's something that I've talked about a lot, having trained with classical Japanese teachers. They're just different. So that has kind of honed my mind as the unique snowflake that I am. Um, and it's like this barrier where I'm communicating with other people. I'm teaching a craft to other people who don't understand that. They don't know how to learn. So we already, as Americans, whether we realize it or not, or Westerners, let's just call it Westerners, we already are spoon fed. We don't know often what it's like to discern, to search, to study for answers, to be frustrated that maybe you don't need to know the answer. Maybe that frustration is the process you need to go through right now. Um, so we're already there. And I would just argue over the last 10 years, I've been a strength coach, whatever, a fitness advocate, a health teacher, whatever you call me, whatever it is I do. I've been doing it for 3 decades now. And every decade, I see a different dilemma. I see a different problem. We went from an extreme weight loss need to a weight loss combined with a complete and total dysfunctionality in people, where chronic sitting on top of weight loss has destroyed bone structures. I think last time we were talking, I had cited 7 out of 10 American age males can't meet the minimum standards of the draft. It's a combination of being overweight, and they can't put any stress on their hips and femurs. They're literally fracturing under load. That's a
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
The last 10 years, something has happened in here with all of us. And I can't put a finger on any one thing. I can definitely say the introduction of smartphone technology has not aided society. And now, with the introduction of AI, most of us may or may not have noticed, but when you go into just a relative Google search, um, it's no longer what used to be, let's say, I'm in Montreal and I type in martial arts. Well, the way the organic search used to work was the more published works that Kevin Secours had, right? He's got this huge body of work. The algorithm is looking at it and it's like, wow, this guy really knows what he's talking about. He's number one. Okay. And then they started playing with a lot of different ways to beat the system and whatnot. Well, all that is gone, even to the point where a website's gone. Right. When you were asking me is what my website still is, I had to think, I'm like, do I even have one anymore? Do I use that? Does anybody like write me on my website? That's how obsolete a website is, right? And now that's not the search engine, it's AI.
Mhm.
AI, you don't even go in and look at a search in terms of credibility and this person has built up this body of work and their website is first because they're legitimate. Being first would be make you legitimate. All that's gone now. AI is legitimate. I don't need Kevin Secours in there. Google is telling me through AI, this is the answer. And we're also in a place where we just lack absolutely any and all critical thinking, discernment, wisdom, right? Or being able to smell bullshit, being able to call it out and to see a thing. Um, so when we started talking about this subject, and I know I'm being long winded, you're tired. I'm struggling with allergies, so everything is not quite right up in there. Um, and we were talking about all the people, the young man that had committed suicide, um, just any generic information you put into chat GPT. As you kind of push it a little bit, you can tell that it's completely ambiguous. It'll just if you push it one way or the other, it'll give you what it is you're looking for that day.
Yeah.
And it's not just that the truth is kidnapped by this thing. It's what worries me is all the intangibles, right? We can see the effects because we're living in a world where, right? It's that famous line in the Bible where Pilate, looks at Jesus and scoffs and says, "What is truth?" Right? That truth has become relative. We can't quite talk to each other because our languages, words don't mean anything. Truth is kidnapped. Now the answers to all questions are from the genie in the bottle
Mhm.
called AI. You don't have to think for yourself. You don't have to challenge or question the answers. You don't have to dig for them. Um, what happens to us as a culture, right? That's where my brain starts going into the deep rabbit holes of the evolution of the hunter gatherer primal man, completely and totally connected with his environment. He's a master of it 10,000 years ago, right? To what do we become when now you don't have to get up? You've got a chip implanted in your head connected with AI technology. You just think about dominoes and it's at your front door. Scientists that know AI, that understand AI, they're not in agreement because on the low end, one scientist is saying we have about a 33% chance of total annihilation with AI, and the other guy is saying 99.
Yeah. And then there are some guys saying complete false alarm, everything's fine.
Yeah,
Right. And I
yeah,
always, like we've seen in our lifetime this sort of division into like two sides where people can't be friends if they have disagreeing views, which is just terrifying. People can't take criticism. They only go and their algorithm feeds them an echo chamber. And then you think it can't get worse. And then AI, it can give you the complete wrong information. You politely clarify and it says, "Oh, thanks for pointing that out, Stuart. Actually, you're right." And then it continues like nothing happened. I was doing it today and with my first part of this, And I said, what are the best martial arts for self-defense? And it listed five I would not include. And then I said, but aren't, four of these sportive? And wouldn't it make more? Isn't there massive differences between training for the sport and the street? And that's a great point, Kevin. Actually, yes, sportive martial arts are less effective, but you just 80% of your answer was the opposite. So what's going to happen? Like as a former military man who's seen combat, the discipline you have, what happens when you have a generation or all generations, all they've had is agreement. No matter what their view is, it's great, it's perfect. You're all equally entitled masters in your own mind. We
Yeah.
lose the desire to, or even the knowledge of what it is to push, I think. And have you seen, this is one thing I find is I still get people coming through the door who speak like they want to be an apprentice. They speak like they want to achieve mastery, but then they quit after two classes, maybe. They just have no resilience. Have you noticed this?
Well, I just love how we think the same way. And think about those two words you just said, because they're right, they're front and center on not just my notes. Um, Again, I find myself, and I guarantee you feel the same way, uh, slowly but surely moving towards being absolutely obsolete,
Yeah.
where I've had to change so many things that I do. I quit teaching when I can't remember when it was that Dr. Pete and I were coming up there a lot and training, and then I started a combat systema group here in my personal training gym that you had come to when we brought you down for a seminar,
Yeah.
and we had a great group.
Amazing.
And I tell anybody that's willing to listen, because most people are still coming from sporting martial arts, and you don't know what you don't know. I'm not knocking them. We need them. They need to be there. You know, um, but when I was the training that we were doing, what you were bringing to the table was so vastly different. And I'm not trying to get on your good side, but you have a teaching background. Your education is in teaching, and you just had a great ability to fuse um, the subjective reality of the street of you know any given day,
Mhm.
right? Anything goes, with this lineage, this martial lineage, where I can look, and if I want to study with Kevin Secours, I can look and I can see, I know the martial arts that you've trained in. I know their lineage. I know the teachers. I know the tradition. And I can look back on it, and you really have a gift of mirroring the old with the new, and then teaching it in a way that's digestible for just about anybody who's willing to train and train hard, because it is hard training. But that was, I want to say, I mean, I'm terrible with time anymore, 15, 16 years ago.
Yeah, it was 2008,
And
2010.
I'll never forget, um, I had accidentally in training cracked a couple guys' ribs.
Mhm.
And then I had accidentally in training perforated another guy's eardrum. Horrible accidents. You don't want them to happen, but they do. And we all suffer injury.
Hearing is you
And
had perforated his eardrum with the other guy's rib. No.
probably, right? But I remember getting a phone call with the guy that I perforated his eardrum. And it wasn't, hey, I've been hurt, this, that, and the other. I need to take time off. It was, I hope you have insurance,
Yeah.
because I'm going to litigate, basically. Now, I didn't go that far, but I remember holding the phone back like a time warp had just happened. Both of my shoulders, I have stage 4 separations in my shoulders from two Koshinagis from the first day I trained with Hiroshi Ikeda.
Yeah.
Bow. Then the next one, bow. I don't have a single joint in my body that I'm not full time recovering from a lifetime of martial arts. and accidents happen, sometimes intentional things happen, and you feel bad later, but they happen. And it's martial arts training, and you're going to fight the way you train. But I remember that about 15 years ago that the conversation had just completely changed, and I quit teaching martial arts. I just focused on my fitness, and it broke my heart. It really broke my heart. I remember, and I don't know if we had conversations about it, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it was this realization that, man, I can't train the way I want to train and put my family at risk.
Yeah. Last
I
week,
can't.
you want to know how sad it is? I was interviewing a Kung Fu master last week, Lauren Bernard, and I said, "Oh my God, in the mid 90s, I used to go to your school and buy your Dit Dao Jiao, your iron bone ointment for your knuckles. And it was the best thing on the market." And he says, "Yeah, I had to stop selling it. I didn't want to get sued." It's a healing liniment, and you got to be
Was
worried
he
some
making
idiot's
it?
going to put it on his eyes or drink it. It's
Yeah.
like there's no end to it. There's no end to it. And it erodes any trust there can be in the teacher student relationship when you have that kind of energy.
Um, what's lost are these words you keep saying, mastery. What even is that anymore? I just did a video on that the other day, and I was talking about how, we don't have that concept in anything in America. You just take yoga, for example. I studied yoga for a long, long time, went to India. Um, anybody, anybody with enough money, right, can go down to the local mall, get 2,000 square feet, get heaters put in there, and start teaching hot yoga.
Yep.
And just do sun salutations for a straight hour. Everybody's breaking a sweat, right? You're a yoga master. Put some pictures up on the wall, of you doing some cool poses. So and killer social media,
Hmm.
you know. As long as the social media looks right, you're right. You see the lie, and AI loves that lie. So it's going to pick that lie up and go.
Yep.
It is impossible to do that in India. If you don't have a lineage, if you don't have a teacher, if you haven't, in the East, I'm talking about India, the martial arts of Japan, China. I'm sure the Sifu would agree 100%.
Yeah.
Um, a black belt used to mean a white belt turned black from dirt and training, and it's ragged, right? That's what the black belt used to mean. And you can't open up a martial arts school in Japan if you're not legit. You can't open up a yoga studio in India if you don't have lineage and somebody can trace you. Here in the United States, anybody,
Yep.
anybody. And to be honest with you, the people that are the most successful financially, especially in my industry, in fitness, uh, they're the ones that make me scratch my head the most. That I watch what they do and what they put out, information they provide, and it's all bullshit.
Yeah.
They're bullshit. But man, we love the bullshit, right?
Oh, I know. I have
We don't. We don't.
so many well-meaning young students that are like trying to consult with me and give me marketing funnel advice, and I'm like, look at this guy. Not gonna
well,
happen.
not just that, man. It's like we're just of
Yeah.
a different time, brother. There's nothing I can't sell out, man,
Yeah.
for any amount of money. I can't pimp myself out like that.
Yeah.
What's important to me is the blood, sweat, tears, the time, the relationships, right? That's why we're friends, man.
Yeah.
It's like it's not until that you're battle tested with one another. Iron sharpens iron,
Yeah.
and you meet other men like that. Of all people, Sonny Pazuka said, we were chatting one time about training, very similar conversation. And in Pazuka's talk, he's he's like, men just need to hang around men doing manly things, doing man, and it's just Yeah, man. So it's like not only are we not doing that anymore, we can't have the pressure testing of iron versus iron,
Mhm.
sharpening iron. We can't have the bonding and the relationship that come. You think about when you were a young man, it's like your best friend started out probably getting in a really good fight with him,
Yeah.
and then after that, it's like, man, we were buds forever. The guys that I was in combat with, I just got off the phone with one of them, and we talk to each other almost every day. Every time I get off that phone, I love you, brother. I love you.
Yeah.
And that's a different love,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I thought of you
So,
the other day. I saw a clip. I don't know if you saw this. It was Bill Murray, like now at whatever age he is, let's say at least 70. And he was at some kind of function where it was all military guys. And he walked in on a military fitness requirement. And he was doing like a squat with I don't even think his body weight, and it was like uproarious applause that Bill Murray at his age could do this basic fitness requirement. But I was like, I don't do that kind of heavyweight. Like you're big into this. I'm not. I'm all scattered. I'm a butterfly free floating with club bills and whatever. But I'm like, okay, sometimes deep squats and deadlifts they scare me as a thing. That was not impressive. It made me sad. I had a little single tear trickle down, and everyone's like, "Wow, this is amazing at his age." Ah, yeah.
yeah, man.
It's like a 3 push-up fitness requirement. What?
Yeah. And, I hate to be this way because I think, depending on who's listening right now,
Yeah.
um, I'm not, I don't think we're being, melodramatic. I don't think we're being over the top. I think, I feel a lot of times like, I'm in a slow moving funeral,
Yeah.
right? There's just so many things, all these parallels, and this is an interesting one. I think you'll appreciate it. I have all these big time music people that train with me. I have a studio in the heart of Nashville. I've had a studio for forever, and I've trained a lot of popular musicians, their bands, management, and I've got these young guys now. They're about 28, 30, and they're high up executives in the music industry. And I'm playing all kinds of music, but usually one form of rock and roll or the other. And of course, I was a young man during the grunge, and that was an incredible, 5 years to be alive. The culture.
Mhm.
I would imagine it's like how it was for the kids during the Beatles and Elvis. That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah.
And I'll be playing music and stuff, and one of them will be like, "Man, that rocks. Who's that?" And I'll be like, "Led Zeppelin." Like, Zeppelin, dude. What do you mean? Who is that?
Yeah.
Little background music came on today. I was playing with him. I'm like, name that tune. I'll give you $5 so you can tell me who. So I'm doing it all the time with them, and it's just fascinating because how do you know? I see the loss in art. Our
Yes.
music, our music sucks. Our movies suck, right? I see it in art. And what's interesting is the kids, or I call them kids, let's say the 30-year-old generation ish. One of the symptoms of what we're talking about here is they don't understand, they don't know anything about history. They don't have an appreciation for other cultures, former cultures. Um, they're not inspired by other cultures. And I would argue if you look back at every great genre of music, there was a prior genre of music that inspired
Absolutely.
those people. And it's one of those fascinating things that I look at them and I'm like, how can you not know this music, brother?
Yeah.
Right? How'd you not go through your Doors phase, your Pink Floyd phase, your Zeppelin phase, your Jimi Hendrix phase?
I would say two things. I would think every great artist, again, I was a fine artist. I went to art school. That was my thing. Every great artist was inspired by what came before it or working sometimes in opposition to what was before it. And so often, whether it was like the Beat Generation writers or the Impressionist painters, they were always collectives feeding off each other. and just
That's
have
how it
that
was in the
accent.
grunge.
Yeah,
That's if you look at any history about the grunge in Seattle, they were all buddies. All those
absolutely.
bands were
Yeah,
hanging out and collaborating with each other.
yeah,
And it's just one of those things that I notice about the times that we find ourselves in is whatever this thing is that we're trying to put a finger on that's missing. Um, Most especially, it's all ages, but I'm mostly concerned about the effects of our young men, 30s and younger, and women especially. But because I was a struggling young man, for so
yeah.
long, I have a passion, and I look, and it's like I think what we're seeing is like, in the West we don't have a rite of passage like the Maasai tribe. At 13 you got to go kill a lion, and you can't come back until you do, or the Agoge with the Spartans.
Yeah.
You're not a man until you do these things. And for women, they still have a physiological time of their life where they've become a woman. That doesn't happen with men. And so we don't have a rite of passage. Um, and I would argue all the things in that conversation of what it takes to become a man are all these intangibles that we're talking about right now that's gone. And you know that term, the Renaissance man.
Yes.
One of my favorite books of all time is Undaunted Courage by Stephen Ambrose. I actually closed The Total Warrior, a book that was inspired about this topic we're talking about right now.
Hmm.
I closed it talking about these guys, and Thomas Jefferson is one of those Renaissance men. All the founding fathers of the United States, if you look back on them, they were in their teens to mid 20s. Thomas Jefferson was probably 25 when he's writing Declaration of Independence.
Crazy.
I can't imagine a 20, and he's probably fluent in 3 or 4 languages. He can use a sextant.
Hmm.
He's a master farmer. He knows the environment. He's a hunter. He knows flora, fauna. Um, he knows music and culture. He knows business, finance, um, and he could probably duel
Hmm.
with the best of them. And all these things were requirements of somebody like him. And I don't think it was necessarily a crazy rare thing back then, because obviously, again, if you look at the signers of the Declaration of Independence, you got some pretty amazing folks there.
Yeah.
And, Undaunted Courage is about that attitude that packed up a couple of canoes and went upriver and all the way across the United States. And I wrote in the Total Warrior, I lament that is that gone, that spirit
Yeah.
where it requires that if you want to do something, if you want to be a Thomas Jefferson, you've got to study. Right? I can't tell you how many people I talk to, because one of my hobbies is studying the Bible. I study the Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic. I read Catholic Bible, Orthodox Bible, uh, uh, all kinds of Bibles. Um, I love to study it, and so many people will um, either attempt to discourage me or just don't understand. The amount of time that I put into meditation, prayer, studying my Bible. I see the gym and the dojo as that. The dojo means mirror.
Hmm.
Place of reflection. You're there to clean yourself up, and that requires a certain attitude that, with the introduction of this technology that we're facing, buddy, it's just downright cataclysmic.
Yeah. Well,
it's an ending.
so that we don't sound like dystopian old men. The other day when we were talking, yesterday we were talking, and you made the joke that about five people have made to me this week, which was, hasn't anybody watched Terminator? And I hope it doesn't go that way. But one of my buddies last week said something more frightening, and he said, I was worried like 5% chance this would become like Terminator. Now I don't think it's going to turn out that well. And I said, what do you mean? He says, as well as Terminator. He goes, that movie started with humans fighting back. And he goes, my fear is that we're like frogs in boiling water and we've just forgotten how to fight. And so my question to you would be this. I know there are still young men and women out there that still want to fight. What do you say? So you've mentioned study as an important feature. What do you say to that listener who is younger and aspiring and they want to go, but they can't find the environment? They can't find anyone to go with. They've got to go it alone. What advice do you give to them to become stronger?
So my advice is always fitness first, because the one thing that you can do, and you can do it totally alone, um, you can get gym equipment at home. You don't have to join a gym. There is nothing interpersonal about a barbell. So all the personal things and all the reasons that you may have for not being able to find the right martial arts school, I get it. It's going to be a challenge. But what isn't as challenging is just the ability to just say, tomorrow I'm going to start getting in better shape, right? Because strength is never a weakness. Your fitness is never going to be a weakness. And at some point, when you do find that right dojo, I think we're still at a place. I trained several, uh, black belt level jujitsu guys that are just now getting into strength training, and the lights going off in their head that, wait a minute, my technique is still the same thing. I'm still as good as I was, but now I'm bigger, stronger, and faster. So all things being equal, right? Whoever's bigger, stronger, faster is just simply going to win the day. The
Yeah.
best athletes are bigger, stronger, and faster. And I think like a tactical athlete. I want my martial skill there, but in the event of a disaster or shit has hit the storm or uh, any of the reasons that are the foundations of self-defense, fitness is first. It just is.
Yeah.
So, and you can do that in the comfort of your own home. You can join a gym, right? So you can start getting more fit, and as you're doing that, um, your quest for the right martial arts school, or wherever you want to take it, tactical, whatever you want to do. But I think
I
if we don't have a foundation of fitness, man,
I remember, like, as a jiu-jitsu guy, when UFC came out, my jiu-jitsu coach was very traditional. He was into like stones and basic barbells, and you always lifting punching bags, and you had to be strong. Everything about what we did was about strengthening a certain way. And then the Gracies came out, and they were really promoting this myth that the smallest guy can beat the biggest and size doesn't matter. And I remember, some years after Hoist retired, he came out with a fitness book co-authored by a strength trainer. He's on the cover, and the guy's doing all the technique on how to lift. And then now when you think of BJJ, you've got guys like Gord Ryan who are super jacked, and now it's the opposite. Now they say, oh, they're all steroided and whatever. But isn't it interesting how powerful marketing was, that it still has convinced people size doesn't matter? Where by comparison, if you look at something like American wrestling, there's never been a period from ancient Greeks onward, there's never been a period where wrestlers didn't condition. Ever. They never
yeah,
sold
but
that myth.
or any military,
Ever.
right?
Yeah.
80% of your training in the military is not doing live fire. It's expensive, man.
Yep.
It's not jumping out of airplanes. It's not doing all that fun stuff. It's fitness.
Yeah.
It's rucking. It's heavy rucking and conditioning, and it's constant when you're in the military. So fitness is first, man. And I saw a little meme the other day, and it was it was basically, a jujitsu player talking about being tired, how everybody has a fear of being tired. And if you've ever been in a fight, or especially when you're doing jujitsu, somebody knows how to play that pressure game, and you're just being smashed and you can't breathe and they won't let you up. Um, you know, uh, and you're gassed at the same time. You're not gonna be able to withstand um, a real life scenario very well. Um, if you're not in condition enough to handle a stress load like that. And I think the pressure testing of jujitsu, um, is where something like strength training will exhibit itself even more. And it's just been interesting. You're so right that that marketing of it doesn't matter how big you are. I know you have trained with those guys because I sure have, that just literally can crush your hand,
Oh
right? They
yeah,
have that kind of strength. Guys that can just literally pick you up and shove your head, into a ceiling. Guys that just
yeah,
no training at all out on the street, your flying triangle probably isn't gonna
yeah.
go so well, right?
I interviewed a teacher, and ultimately the podcast interview was so bad I couldn't use it, so it didn't air. But I asked him, I said, "What do you do when you meet a guy who just genetically or because of a rough life is just so far above you in ability and intensity that even with all your training, you're not close?" And he's like, "I don't understand." And I said, look, my sensei used to always say, I go hard on you because you started off with a soft life, and I need to get you to taste bitter. And this guy came into the dojo one day, and he goes, I said, that guy doesn't even train hard. He's a machine. He goes, yeah, but his whole life sucks. He was abused. He's like, look at his genetics. Like his whole life, he's tougher than you. So he can afford to go light. You have to go hard if you have any hope of catching up, you know? And I told that
Yeah.
story, and the guy goes, doesn't happen. And then I thought to myself, how much of an echo chamber are you living in that or how egotistical are you that you can't even admit you've met somebody once who intimidates you, impresses you? But there's part of me when I see a lion, I'm like, I wonder if I could last 2 seconds or three.
Exactly.
You're always
Yeah.
thinking, this guy, no, he's like, I just walk through life certain in my own capacity. And I thought, wow, that's like what utter delusion, And is that just from never having pushed, never having tested, never having failed? Because how do you push without having failed? How do you
Yeah.
have, wow, it's,
Not being probably not being on the street ever, just being
yeah,
in the microcosm of a dojo, you can think that, but you're exactly right. You look at the up what where jujitsu is headed is that Gordon Ryan guy who figured out
yeah,
all things being equal, bigger, stronger, faster wins the day. And you put technique like his and a teacher like Danaher in with a dude who's big and strong, aggressive on steroids,
yeah.
it's a no brainer. And wrestling has known this, for a long time. And I think, we're moving in that area in jujitsu right now, kind of like, with Gordon Ryan, kind of like Tiger Woods did to golf or Jerry Rice did to football back in the 80s. Back in the 80s and 70s, in the offseason in the NFL, they didn't train. They just took off. Like the thought of training during the summer is nuts.
Yeah.
Jerry Rice was one of the first guys to like train year round, and they thought he was nuts, but look at the payoff. And you know, when Tigers introduced strength training to golf, it was absurd. And look at the payoff. So now you're not going to find a single golfer that isn't strength training. You wouldn't be able to compete. And I think we're right at that place where it's getting ready to happen in jujitsu. And one of the reasons is the influence of wrestling in MMA.
Yes.
And if you look at the guys, the art um, that over time has proven itself to be the most effective, it's the wrestlers
Mhm.
that learn how to stand up and learn submissions on the ground, defense on the ground.
Yeah.
They rule. They're bigger,
100%.
stronger, faster, and
When you get a young guy, Stuart, that comes into your gym and they've got the fire, but maybe they don't have the structure because they're surrounded by uncooked dough in society. What do you do? What do you like to do to get them breathing fire?
um, I'm lucky enough that I have those guys. I like to set up a type of circuit training that I call the Amish WOD, and it's based on work capacity. And again, if you think about work capacity, back to what I was saying before, it's like the worst thing that can happen to us in combat um, is to become absolutely exhausted,
Mhm.
unable to defend yourself, exhausted. And isn't that a horrible thing to find yourself there one day, um, having never trained
Oh, yeah.
for that, right? You just never trained that way. So the guys that are able to train hard, I will try to set up a circuit where work capacity and also an introduction of failure are always inherent. They're going to happen at some point. You're going to get so fatigued that form is breaking down. Um, it's just time to throw in the towel on that. And I think it's important to train yourself to a place of discomfort, to a place of failure, where you and the coach, one of the subjective things about having a coach is that he takes you to that place of failure and is able to kind of pull you back out of it. Just little introduction of it. In a nutshell, I think that's the name of the game with any kind of training.
Mhm.
That in the beginning we were talking about Shoha and Ray, form function content, that's inherent in all martial systems, language, music. One of the things that's lost with this technology. No, and when I'm saying failure, it's when we start to see, let's say every circuit, the weight is increasing, right? There's a point at which you are just simply unable to meet the demands. Let's say your last round around a deadlift,
Mhm.
and we're doing 5 repetitions. Um, and set four is all you can get out of that 5 repetitions, right? And you're able to set the bar down safely, but you didn't have 5 reps in you, right? You've reached a point of successful failure in that you've pressure tested a certain weight, right? You know very well that you can do 4 reps with a certain amount of weight. You can't do 5. Um, you've gotten yourself to a place of of failure by knowing I simply can't go any higher, right? I've reached the incapacity.
Mhm.
So I think when you have an opportunity like weight training, again where it doesn't there's no subjective people involved, you can constantly train that certain level of almost going to failure or failure where you try a 1 rep max and you're just not successful. But you don't try it and just dump it. You grind it, you work against it, and it teaches you something. So the failure that's introduced in there is not failure at all. It's actually what we're using to make you stronger, right? It's not going into the gym and succeeding in doing a certain amount of repetitions. I did 3 sets of 10 with an exercise. You need at least 1 repetition in that exercise that's at least close to failure, or physiologically there's no reason for the muscle to adapt, right? You did exercises, you burned some calories, but it didn't result in anything.
Tell me about your Amish WOD. What kind of exercises are you doing in this?
I like to take multiple compound exercises and put them together. And unlike CrossFit, I don't do it for time. I do it in a circuit, And again, I'm looking for work capacity. So I might take 7 exercises in a circuit with multiple barbells. Now, the drawback of doing that workout is you can't do that in a gym, and most people don't have 2 or 3 barbells in their home. So it's one of those things that's unique to the way I have my gym set up. So I have basically 3 compartments to my gym. So I'm able to do a circuit that moves through the entire building. So we're able to do deadlifts and presses and rows or landmine exercises with barbell, cable exercises, standard bodybuilding exercises, mixed with a lot of functional movement patterns.
I'm gonna put you on the spot. Let's say we got a guy at home, has no weights, no money for a gym, he has nothing. Could you give some ideas for how they could do that using body weight?
Yes, and recommendations, actually, easy recommendation. I think everybody probably in your audience would be familiar with Pavel,
Mhm,
who's partly responsible for bringing Russian kettlebell
mhm.
into the United States. He started with Dragon Door, and now he's Strong First. So you can find all his certifications if you wanted kettlebell certifications with Strong First, but he does education around the kettlebell. He'll do weekend workshop certifications, body weight, and also a barbell. I've not attended his body weight courses. I have attended his kettlebell and barbell, and it's just very extreme, basic, hard style, perfection of movement, and seeing strength as an art, um, and a progression, a long term progression. But his body weight certifications, and work, his concepts around body work or body weight training, um, I think are probably the best out there. So anything that I do with body weight training all came from Pavel, from his books. Um, you can get a lot of free off YouTube as far as the concepts, how they approach body weight training. So really inexpensively, if you were doing body weight training,
Mhm.
bands, start collecting an assortment of bands, because you can actually attach like an eye bolt if you're willing to do it. If you can, mark your walls, you can screw an eye bolt into your 2x4 into the wall, and you can put those bands inside of it. So it basically becomes like a cable machine. And I use bands all the time. Um, Kettlebells, you probably need to start with like a 20 to a 24 kilo if you can afford it. Maybe a 16, a 20, and a 24 if you're a guy, a man. A woman, probably 8 and 12. And if you're swinging bells and doing body weight exercises with bands, most especially, as a martial artist, um, you can get insanely strong, and it definitely will spill over into uh, your martial art. You'll see it.
Stuart, the best way to reach you, it's still the website five, written out FIVE, 5stonesbarbell.com.
Yep.
You're mostly on Instagram, Stuart Breeding,
Yep.
on Instagram. I will put both in the description link down below. And if anybody's in the Nashville area, you got to do yourself a favor and check out Stuart. I got to say, Stuart, of all the places I've been in the world, Nashville, one of the most beautiful cities. My God, we had
Yeah.
fun there. So much fun.
Well, we hope to have you back, man. We'd love to have you back.
Absolutely, brother.
Yeah, dude.
As always, man, thank you for being the inspiration that you are, for being the example that you are. I wrote down strength is never a weakness because I think that is my new mantra. What a great quote. Such a great idea. Thank you for being on. And guys, thank you for the requests. Thank you for listening. And until next time, stay safe and stay strong.